Thank you. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Committee of the Whole Finance and Administration Communications meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023 at 4:31 p.m. I am Councilmember Jessica Forsyth, standing in for Chair Councilmember Fields. In attendance, we have Councilmember Anderson, Stewart, Kritzer, and Carson is online. We have 4 items on the agenda today. The first one is the ordinance amending Redmond Municipal Code 13.16.050, low-income disabled and low-income senior citizens credit, and updating the definition of disabled.
Good afternoon, Interim Director Kelly Cochran of Finance. With me, I have Debbie Karanova. She's our Fiscal Services Manager, oversees purchasing and utility billing. And with her, we have Eric Banas, he is our Utility Billing Supervisor. They are here to walk you through this item.
Your microphone's not on. That's a tricky one. Try again. There you go.
Thank you. The item we're presenting is approval of an ordinance amending Redmond Municipal Code 13.16.050, Section A, low-income disabled and low-income senior citizen credit, to update the definition of disabled. We are asking for support to move this item to next week's consent agenda on May 16th. Under this code, low-income disabled and low-income senior citizens may be eligible for the city's utility credit program, which provides qualified customers a 50% credit on their utility bill. The proposed revisions to the code will clarify the definition of disabled to mean someone who has been determined to be totally and permanently disabled as defined by the Social Security Administration or Veterans Benefits Administration. Currently in our code, a disabled person is defined as someone who qualifies for special parking privileges, or a blind person, or as being disabled, handicapped, or incapacitated under a state or federal program. The proposed revisions will encompass these existing definitions and will standardize and clarify the criteria by which the city defines disabled and the required documentation needed to prove eligibility for the program. The proposed changes to the code will remove potential confusion, as our utility billing staff will no longer be in the position of having to make a judgment call and possibly dispute an applicant's disability. The added clarity will give customers and city staff clear guidance and consistency. In addition, the proposed changes will align with the criteria and requirements of low-income discount programs from other Washington cities. For some background, the majority of the applications we receive already include letters of verification from Social Security or Veterans Administration as proof of an applicant's disability. In 2022, there were 106 customers enrolled in the city's low-income program, and the city distributed a little over $72,000 in discounts. If approved, any changes as a result of the updated definition would take effect going forward. No changes would be made to anyone who was already enrolled in the program.
Thank you. Any questions from council members? Councilmember Kritzer.
2 questions. One is, so what I'm hearing from you in terms of it encompassing and not making changes, are we sure that the changes that we're making is only expanding and that there won't be any people who currently qualify? You said you would be kind of grandfathered in if you're already in it, but just in general, those who might have qualified under the current criteria, would they, we don't think this would leave any future potential people out that would have fit in those criteria? Just wanted to make sure it's as inclusive as possible, since it seems to be what we checked on it.
Yeah, we don't have anybody that's on the program right now that would be disqualified with the new code.
Or anyone who maybe isn't in the program now but would have usually have qualified, I guess, is the question. With this,
who isn't in the program now but would have qualified under the old code and would not now?
Yes.
I suppose that's a possibility, but every application that we have received would qualify. They tend to submit the Social Security award letter or the letter from the Veterans Affairs.
Great. And then secondly, It sounds like this is a technical definition that needs to be pretty honed in so that it can align to the federal definitions. But I am curious whether, since we were trying to update this to be a little bit more inclusive, and even the changes taking out citizen, whether we did any engagement with residents who identify as disabled or living with a disability to get their feedback, since we're trying to get it right this time. Just wanted to know a little more about the process.
It's more to just standardize it and the other cities surrounding here. I did a little bit of research on surrounding cities, and it's basically what most of the cities around use is the letter from Social Security or the Veterans Administration. Bellevue does the same thing. Mercer Island, Renton, and the big idea is to take it out of our utility billing's hands to make a judgment call on whether or not somebody qualifies. So under the current code, if somebody has a handicap placard, they could qualify for this program, even if it's temporary in nature. So if somebody has a handicap placard, even for a couple months, they could apply for this program and get it, and then we're having to follow up with them as far as when does this thing expire and things like that, and we're having to make judgments. This would just clarify things and make it more standard where they qualify or they do not qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Just a quick question. So we've referenced the Social Security Administration and the Veterans Administration as well. Do we know, having not personally read through the federal law for ADA, are those definitions that are used for the Social Security Administration and the Veterans Administration in alignment with the definition of disability in the Americans with Disabilities Act?
We would have to check on that, but I believe so, but we can follow up.
Thank you. I would appreciate that.
Thank you. I actually had a similar question, wanting to make sure that this is in line with ADA. So if we could get an email before this is scheduled to be on consent, if we get that far. And then as I read it in the memo here, this is not necessarily disqualifying those folks, but it's just ensuring, from what I'm hearing from the conversation, ensuring that the kind of loophole that we currently have of people potentially getting onto this program while they're on a limited capacity placard, that kind of goes away. Is that really the only use case that we're kind of trying to correct for?
That's one example. I would say that it would be bringing the clarity to the entire program, really, for various scenarios that might happen that might be a gray area. It would just give us that consistent criteria.
All right. And any other questions? And I will announce that Councilmember Carson has joined us in person. And this is set for consent, looking for consent on, sorry, need to get back to the 16th, thank you. Are we good with that, with pending that information? Great, thank you. Next up, we have the first quarter 2023 overtime report.
Good afternoon again. I have with me today Senior Financial Analyst Marissa Flynn to walk through with us the first quarter overtime report.
All right, there we go. Good afternoon, Council. So I'm going to go over with you the first quarter overtime report for 2023. Through March of 2023, total city overtime is $1.3 million, or 3.3% ahead of budget. Not over budget, just ahead of where we would expect to be on a straight line basis at this point in the biennium. However, total salaries, which include both regular and overtime salaries, are 0.5% or $918,000 under budget expectations, which indicates that we have quite a bit of vacancy savings that are offsetting that overtime. Looking at the fire department, overtime is $929,000 in total through March, which is 2.5% ahead of budget expectations. Total salaries, however, regular and overtime, are $71,000 under budget expectations. There's a few reasons for this. As you know, fire has 4 unfunded overhires, which they are utilizing at this point to staff up fully. They also are currently borrowing 2 positions from the police department, which are also therefore unfunded. Additionally, we have line staff who are instructors at the fire academy, and while we are reimbursed for that, while they are gone, we do incur overtime backfilling for those positions. And then finally, the fire department has quite a few folks on light or modified duty and on long-term leave. This is things like parental leave, on-the-job injuries. For folks who are on modified duty, they are able to support department work. They are doing other jobs within the department, but they do have to be backfilled on the line, so that does still incur overtime. Moving on to the police department, overtime is $265,000 total, which is 7.2% ahead of budget, again on that straight line basis. However, total salaries are 1.3% or $441,000 under budget expectations. And that's because police currently has $537,000 of vacancy savings. Looking at all other departments, there's a total of $148,000 of overtime, and it's 5.9% ahead of budget. But looking at regular and overtime salaries together, all other departments are $408,000 under budget expectations. Within the Public Works Department, the right-of-way workload is currently just busy. It's requiring more than 40 hours per week of work. Parks is 1.9% ahead of budget, but is more than offset by vacancy savings. And the Planning Department is 6.7% below budget expectations. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from council? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you so much, Ms. Flynn. Could you remind us on the right-of-way inspections? Is any of that work reimbursable?
I believe it is all fully reimbursed.
Okay, we've seen some contracts just lost track of the pieces. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Kurtzberg.
Can you just briefly explain how it works to borrow positions from the police department?
Sure. So as you know, council authorizes our total number of positions, and we are able to lend positions essentially within the same fund. So the position is allowed, which means that the police department can't fill those 2 officer positions at the moment, but money is not lent. So the fire department has to find their own way to fund the cost of those borrowed positions. But when we have cases in the city where one department is, very low on staffing, like the police department, they're not super low, but they have availability right now. We do sometimes lend positions to help with these staffing shortages. Is that the right word? Staffing shortages in other departments.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, given that was an informational item, thank you for presenting today, and we'll move on to our next item. Thank you. Next up is item number 3, Transportation Benefit District Resolution of Intent to hold a public hearing and ordinance of assumption. This will be a conversation for consent on May 16th.
Yep, so we're here with steps kind of 2 and 3 of the process. So first of all, congratulations on a big move last week. It was pretty exciting. So I know there wasn't enough people here for my excitement, but we are moving on now to steps 2 and 3. So we have you have formed a transportation benefit district, the first ever here in Redmond. Right now, it is its own sort of jurisdictional body, and we are going through now the next process, which is assuming it. Bringing it under the power of the city council instead of having a separate board that operates it. So the first thing that we need to do is issue a resolution that declares our intent to assume the TBD, as well as hold a public hearing on that issue. So the plan is that we will, on the 16th, have on the consent agenda that resolution. As soon as you pass it, then we will issue the notices that are required for that public hearing. It takes 2 rounds of noticing. And then the public hearing will happen on the 6th, followed again by what you did last week, which is an immediate approval of that ordinance. So after June 6th, the TBD will be formed, and it will be under the authority of City Council. So that is where we are at.
Councilmember Anderson.
When does the tax begin?
So the next thing, that's the next part of a path, is step 4. So we will have the sales tax ordinance available for your review at the June FAC meeting. It is then on the agenda for the last meeting in June for passage. We then need to provide that information to the Department of Revenue as well as the State Auditor's Office, so we can notify them of the need to be audited and Department of Revenues to start collecting. So we will see revenue beginning in 2024.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Everybody good for this to be on consent for May 16? Great. Thanks for keeping us on track.
Yeah, thank you.
And lastly on this agenda, we have item number 4, meeting room audio-video equipment replacement.
Good afternoon, council members. Mike Marchand, Chief Information Officer. Joining me online is Bernie Bergano, our Customer Care Manager. And today we're here to seek approval to have added to the May 16th consent agenda funding for a contract with AVI SPL in the amount of $842,159.95 for refreshing and modernizing the audio-video equipment in 26 meeting rooms in City Hall, the MOC, Public Safety Building, Fire Station 11 and 17. And this project was approved as part of the BTIP, labeled AV Infrastructure, in the amount of $1,125,000.
Great. Any questions? Councilmember Stewart.
I don't have a question so much as I just am excited about this work and the opportunity to give our staff and ourselves and everyone who needs it the basic tools of the modern era. And reading through the proposal, it's really stark what's not there yet. And so excited to see this move forward next week. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think my only question would be, do you anticipate we will remain on budget given the state of everything?
Well, I don't want to jinx it, but it looks very positive that we'll come under budget with this project. So this will encompass 26 of 35 possible rooms. The other rooms that we're leaving out, based on some of the research we did, have very low usage. And for those rooms, rather than fully equip them, we're going to put a Teams-enabled phone in them. So I think once this rollout is complete, we'll gauge whether or not there's an increased level of interest for further rollout to other rooms. But it's definitely looking positive. So.
Great to hear. Any other questions? Everybody good with this on consent on May 16? I'm seeing thumbs everywhere. Wonderful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. If there are no items for good of the order, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.